On this episode of 3 Key Insights.
The big test is going to be used EVs because those prices right now are so attractive that the average used car shopper has to consider them. They're just such a great deal. Whether or not that person then has a great experience after they get that used electric car, that's going to determine the future of electric cars for at least another decade in North America.
The auto industry is moving fast, and it's getting more complex. Success today takes more than instinct, it takes insight. Welcome to 3 Key Insights with Sanjiv Yajnik, president of Capital One Auto. On this episode, Sanjiv is joined by Brian Moody, a top automotive analyst and industry expert. With his background in vehicle valuation, consumer media, and hands-on dealership experience, Brian brings a distinct point of view on pricing, shop growth, and why physical showrooms still matter.
I'm really excited today to be speaking with Brian Moody. He is an amazing talent in the auto industry, has been one of the key journalists in the industry, has been the executive editor for Auto Trader, been a senior automotive editor at Edmunds.com, a spokesperson for Kelley Blue Book, and has written many articles, has a lot of podcasts. So welcome, Brian. And just to start us off, would you mind just telling us a little bit about your journey? How did you get here, and what are the various things you've done along the way?
Sure. Thank you for that very nice introduction. I would say the way that I got here, the number one thing is probably from my dad. He was a policeman in Los Angeles, but was a super car guy. Like, he was really into that, and he would take me to car events. We would play games like, if you can name certain cars on the road, we would get to stop and have a snack on a road trip. And from there, I just kind of ended up, like buying cars of my own. I went to college and studied media, so internet, television, and radio, and also worked at several dealerships in Sacramento and just learned the business that way. And then, like you said, worked at a lot of consumer-facing publications. One of the interesting things that I learned, and I'm glad that I had that dealership experience, because I got to see things from both sides. Oftentimes when you're on one side or the other, you hear stories and like, well, they do this and they say that, and this never works. And when you see it from both sides, you're like, well, actually, that's not 100% true based on my experience. So that's a little bit about what I've done since, say, childhood until now. And it's always been, let's just say I had an amazing Hot Wheels collection when I was a kid, and that continues.
And of your the various jobs that you've had along the way, which is your favorite and why?
My favorite is, I really like doing media, because for me, it's like being on a team, like a sports team. The batter can't pitch, at least not at the same time, and the outfielder can't run up and hit the ball. And when everybody has a job and everybody does it together, especially when it's live, it just feels electric, like it feels like something special. So I love those opportunities, because oftentimes you just get one chance and each person does their job. And when you do your job, you either disappoint or earn the praise of the team. And then it kind of just goes whether you're doing good or not.
And are there particular topics that you're very passionate about versus others in the whole auto space?
The topic that's often missed is that dealerships frequently are a small business in a remote area that provides excellent jobs for the people in that community, and taking care of them or making sure that they're taken care of is often overlooked in light of, well, let's help consumers.
There's a lot going on in the industry, in the auto industry, as is in most industries right now, driven by a variety of factors, technology, some of it, but also there's a whole bunch of forces playing in the auto industry. Can you give us a sense from your perspective, what are some of the top things that would come to mind as you look at the entire car selling industry and
Right.
the automotive industry?
Well, affordability is obviously one of the main things, if not the main thing, that's top of mind for people. And we see automakers beginning to address that. And I think that this is a perfect relationship between dealers and automakers. I think dealers for a long time have been saying, hey, we need lower price options. Not everybody can afford this, or that. And I think that's a number one concern for many people. What I've seen and what seems to work is oftentimes the bigger the dealership, the more they can do this. You treat the new car sales as sort of a marquee, for example, the big advertisement, the big get to get people in the door. And once you do that, then there's other opportunities for you to serve them, either with service or with parts or with financing products. All of those things are important, but getting people in the door is important. One of the things that I saw that was the most impressive was at the height of Ford Bronco fever. There was a dealership in Los Angeles, and they basically just said, we're charging MSRP. That's it. And the reason they did that was because they knew they could build trust with consumers by getting them down there and into the car that they wanted, and then therefore earning a customer for life or for a lot longer. And I saw that work. I thought that was fascinating. At the same time, those cars were relatively expensive. So affordability is important, but it also depends on what consumers want, and consumers don't always know what they want.
How do you think a dealer's business has changed over the last, say, 5 or 10 years?
Well, one thing is consumers have a lot more information, and they have a lot more information at their disposal. And on the one hand, you could argue, well, that's a good thing, right? More information is always going to be better. However, the dealership is not in control of whether or not the consumer has good information or not. They just don't have a say. The consumer is inundated, as we all are, with news and topics and prices, and you ought to this and you should that. And then we also see brokers coming into that too. So what's difficult is from a consumer perspective, the dealer has to deal with all that. They have to deal with the aftermath of bad information, for example. And the number one way that you can do that is by building a relationship or having a rapport with that consumer, getting them to trust that what you're saying is, in fact, the truth. You can read whatever articles you want online, but the truth is if there's a high demand vehicle, it's going to be more. That's just how it is. It also is helpful to steer people onto lower priced alternatives, but dealing with the information onslaught, I think, would be a very big challenge for most dealerships.
And how do dealers orient themselves towards that challenge from your perspective, what you've seen?
Yeah, I think having experienced salespeople, I think having salespeople and a sales team that truly wants to give the customer the best thing for them, and to help them discover that, even if that means taking a little bit of extra time, and of course conducting themselves in a professional manner. One thing that I've told consumers for many years, and I think this works well in a dealership capacity, is that consumers should look at buying a car the way that they would look at any serious financial transaction. You wouldn't buy a boat or a home or anything else and just show up and go, I don't know, what do you have? Well, they're going to sell you something if you do that. It's important to treat it like it's a serious financial transaction and say, here's the person I want to talk to. Here's what my needs are. Here's what my budget is. Here's within those parameters. And one of the things I learned about consumers from working at a dealership is it's important for the dealership to be honest, of course. But you know what's more important? For the consumer to be honest. That oftentimes means including things about your credit score or your purchasing power that might be uncomfortable. But the more honest the consumer is, the better deal they're likely to get.
One of the things that partly surprised me, but partly did not, is that when I asked what can dealers do, you straight away went to the salespeople.
Yeah.
So why did you go to the salespeople and why not to the technology?
Because the best technology is going to enhance the human and personal connection. If technology isn't making people's lives easier or making better human connections, then it's just technology that exists for itself. That's not that helpful. Technology can definitely serve consumers and serve dealerships, but ultimately it's going to be the human connection that brings people in.
Are you basically saying that um, at the end of the day, the winning combination in a dealership is, of course, having technology that helps make it easier for the customer to understand a whole bunch of things. But in the final analysis, the human connection is incredibly important.
Right. That's exactly right. And think about how that works within our vehicles, right? You want something that's going to make the experience more pleasant or easier to do. You don't want it to make it more difficult. And we've seen consumers already sort of push back on like, hey, this screen might be too big. There's too many sub menus. I don't want to have to go 3 steps just so I can adjust the bass on the stereo. Same thing with the sales experience. If you can explain it to them or show it to them in a simple, easy to navigate way, and they can get halfway there. I've spoken to many consumers that have said, I'm fine doing the initial research online, but when it comes down to the test drive and when it comes down to what my options are, most people want a person to do that.
Brian, how do you see the service end of the dealership, which is where the cars are serviced and the service bays, etc.? Is it going to be more important, less important as we move into the future?
More important. And here's the hard part about that is that at the same time, they're going to become more important. So what I said earlier about think of the new car sales as a marquee to get the audience in, and you're going to make money off of service and you're going to make money off of selling financial products and all this kind of stuff. The hard part about that is that even though service is going to be increasingly important, it already is, but it's going to become increasingly important for these dealerships to stay profitable and offer high-paying, good jobs. At the same time, we're seeing a shortage of technicians, and we're seeing a lot of people not wanting to go into those fields. For example, I spoke to a Mazda dealer in Los Angeles, and he said they have an on-site body shop. So that's a money-making thing for the dealer. It's a profit center, of course. Nothing wrong with that. And at the same time, it's a convenience for the consumer. The consumer goes down there and maybe they had an accident and the mechanical and the body can all be done in one place. Maybe they can get a rental car from there, but it's all one place. They go down, they pick up their car from beginning to end. The place they trust, maybe even the place they bought their car, is going to be doing the repair. The guy that I spoke to, who was the GM of the dealership, said, I don't know how much longer we can offer that, because we're not backfilling those jobs.
Now, that's going to be a big challenge. Now, how do you see hybrids or EVs affecting dealerships, affecting the market? What is the impact going to be on that front?
Well, I think a good model for that is probably Toyota. They saw what was coming. They have electric cars, but they also have many hybrids. Consumers who are in the market for a new car, and by the way, the average used car on the road today is about 12 and a half years old. So that likely isn't a hybrid. It could be, but it likely isn't. And a lot's changed since then. Hybrids are the thing that meets consumers where they are. It uses the existing infrastructure. I think there's a little bit of an education component that's needed with regard to hybrids. They're not just 30 or 40 miles per gallon. They're 40, 50, or 60 miles per gallon today. And so I think hybrids are going to play a big role. The big test is going to be used EVs, because those prices right now are so attractive that the average used car shopper has to consider them. They're just such a great deal. Whether or not that person then has a great experience after they get that used electric car, that's going to determine the future of electric cars for at least another decade in North America.
And Brian, how do you see, this is not directly connected to electric cars, but there is some connection based on the way technology is going. How do you see self-driving cars impacting car ownership and therefore dealers?
With the dealers, the hard part is going to be the servicing of those components. That takes sophistication. Just like with electric cars, like I went to an Audi dealership and they had they had to add like 7 new service bays because electric cars could not be serviced in the same bays as the gasoline powered cars because of the weight and because of the requirements. Same thing with the self-driving thing. The same tools and the same technologies are not going to work to do that.
The one part of the question was about car ownership. Do you see any impact to car ownership based on the technology that is coming out?
The idea of the Tesla idea where you buy a car and then you rent it out or maybe you don't even own it. I think that people are grossly underestimating one thing, and that is how specific, how squeamish people are about their own personal spaces. I just don't know that the average person wants a bunch of people to be in their car that they didn't know or didn't see. I could be wrong, but I think that at this moment, the not owning a car and just putting it on the network feels like the kind of thing that a business person would do, not that an average mom and pop person would do.
That is such a good point because, at least what we've seen is cars are not only a vehicle to transport a person from point A to point B. There are emotional connections as well. I mean, there's personal space, but it's also an emotional connection. And it's something really, really important to families. And, kids always remember the first car they had in the family and, what they did, the road trips, all of that. So I suspect you're right.
And people also, they tend to wear their cars, not just drive them, right? So they see it as a thing. Like I gave my wife a big presentation one time about how I think we should get a 1970s station wagon and we should make it like new and make it safe and make it reliable. And I went on and on about how I wanted to do that. And at the end of all that, she said, Volvos are cute. So she was thinking of herself as wearing the car, not just driving an object. And when you think about people like that, I don't know how that works with, oh, sure, anyone can take it.
I love that that quote. Tend to wear the cars, not just drive it. I'm going to use that. Is there anything else, Brian, you're seeing in the industry that that most people are missing?
When it comes to things like Chinese cars, we're not just talking about that. What we're really talking about is price sensitivity. And that those cars may end up making their way into our market under different brands or without even our knowledge. There could be platform sharing. There could be part sharing that we don't even know about. So everyone thinks of these things, electric cars, same thing, as it's all or nothing. That's not really how people operate. It's going to be a gradual, blurry line. And I think people are going to appreciate the price of those. But also you have other technology coming into the market that I think is very exciting. Nissan's new Series Hybrid, which is going to be in the Rogue. So it drives like an electric car, but it uses gas to charge up.
So with lower price cars, if it goes that way, in other words, technology driving down the price of cars, like they've driven down the price of, say, in the early days, we would have the early VCRs cost an arm and a leg, and then slowly they just became like you just pick them off a shelf.
Yeah.
They disappeared completely. And we're not saying cars are disappearing completely, but if this happens and the prices are driven down, it's good for the consumer. What about for the dealer?
Well, that goes back to the relationship and the selling of services. If you have a relationship and you can sell, I'm just making this up, simple software, or you can sell services. I would, if it were me, I would run the service department. I would be running it like a detail shop. Because once you have their car, of course, most people are going to say no, but you can offer them for an extra added value. What if I did this to your car? What if I reconditioned this? I can get your leather to come back. All of these things, those are services that can live with the car well beyond it being new.
It's been wonderful talking about all of these topics, and you see the world through a journalist's eyes, and you see it in such a broad way because you see it from the customer standpoint, You
Mm-hmm.
see it from the car manufacturer standpoint. You see it from the dealership standpoint.
Sure.
But if I had to summarize some of the major things, there are many, many points that we brought up.
Sure.
But if I had to summarize them and bring them together, I think one is that we should not underestimate the importance of dealerships
Mm-hmm.
and of car ownership. Dealerships are there to provide cars because people want to own the cars. Dealers play an incredibly important role.
Mm-hmm.
And because customers view cars as a different product than some of the other products that they could easily do online, and they don't need to interact with anyone, because the way you've put it, people tend to wear their cars, not
Mm-hmm.
just drive them. So it's a very intensely personal kind of a choice. But technology essentially in a dealership needs to enhance the human connection,
Mm-hmm.
and the humans are going to be incredibly important. So importance of dealerships, importance of car ownership, and importance of the human connection, which is made even better through technology. That is kind of the first insight. The second insight is that the service department going forward is going to play a more and more important role in dealerships. And dealers should be thinking about them not as a after selling the car kind of an afterthought, but starting to think about designing it in a much more strategic way, even considering trying to have everything under one roof, reconditioning, selling other kinds of services, looking after customers, making it an experience. And the third is, as cars become less expensive, how one runs the dealership and what are the kinds of products one has in the dealership should be really strategically looked at. And as the dealer thinks about cars, they should think about hybrids and also EVs, because one way or the other, that is going to be the future. And Brian, you talked about the fact that technicians are hard to find today,
Mm-hmm.
given the long history we have in internal combustion engines. Is going to be equally hard to find them for these new kind of cars. Some of them have internal combustion engines, and they have the electric vehicle piece, and others that are configured in different ways, or even only electric vehicles. You really need to be considering the way in which the dealership is structured to be able to take care of, that kind of a future. But thank you so much for spending the time with us. These are deep insights, given all of your exposure to the car industry. And I'm sure my audience is really going to find that useful.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
The dealers who win turn insights into action. Now's the time to take the lead. This has been 3 Key Insights with Sanjiv Yajnik. We'll see you next time. The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Capital One Auto, Capital One NA, or its affiliates. This content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to serve as financial, legal, tax, or business advice. Viewers should consult their own independent professionals regarding their specific individual or business needs.